The morning sun painted golden streaks across the farmland of Sunnyvale, California, as Margaret Maggie Thompson bent her weathered back over rows of tomatoes. At 61, her body carried the weight of decades spent nurturing both crops and ungrateful family members. Her callous hands, mapped with the geography of hard labor, told stories that her voice never would, stories of sacrifice, silence, and secrets buried deeper than any seed she'd ever planted. Most folks in Sunnyvale knew Maggie as the quiet grandmother who sold produce at the farmer's market every Saturday, the woman whose gentle smile could calm even the most restless child. What they didn't know was that beneath her humble exterior lay a carefully guarded secret worth $310,000, mineral rights to rare earth elements discovered on her land 23 years ago, during what was supposed to be a routine geological survey for a new will. The surveyor, a young man fresh out of college, had pulled Maggie aside that autumn day with trembling excitement. "Mrs. Thompson, you're sitting on a gold mine. These lithium deposits, they're substantial. With the tech boom coming, you could be looking at serious money." Maggie had sworn into secrecy, filed the paperwork quietly, and began receiving quarterly royalty checks that she never mentioned to anyone. Not to her neighbors, not to her church friends, and especially not to her family. She'd learned long ago that money had a way of changing people, revealing their true nature like drought reveals the bones of the earth. The irony wasn't lost on her that while everyone saw her as a simple farmer barely scraping by, she had been the invisible financial backbone of her entire extended family for over 2 decades. Every mortgage payment that mysteriously got covered, every car loan that somehow got paid off, every medical bill that vanished, all of it traced back to Maggie's hidden accounts, distributed through anonymous cashier's checks and wire transfers she'd learned to execute with the precision of a Swiss banker. Her sister Victoria, Vicky, as she insisted everyone call her, was the primary beneficiary of this secret generosity, though she never knew it. At 55, Vicky lived in a sprawling McMansion on the wealthy side of Sunnyvale, a testament to what she believed was her own business acumen and superiority. In reality, her house, her Mercedes, her designer wardrobe, even her position at the prestigious Sunnyvale tech innovations firm, all of it had been quietly subsidized by the sister she openly mocked and belittled at every opportunity. The abuse had started small, the way poison ivy begins with just an itch. Comments about Maggie's quaint little farm life at family gatherings. Jokes about her work-worn hands when they'd meet for coffee. But over the years, especially since Maggie's husband Earl had passed 8 years ago, Vicky's cruelty had metastasized into something truly malignant. "Look at you," Vicky would announce at family barbecues, her voice carrying across the yard like a crow's caw. "Still playing in the dirt at your age. When are you going to do something meaningful with your life, Maggie? It's embarrassing, really. I have to explain to my colleagues that my sister is a farmer." She'd say the word like it tasted sour, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against her wine glass, wine that Maggie had indirectly paid for. The other family members, cousins, aunts, uncles, nieces, and nephews, would either chuckle awkwardly or stare at their plates, their silence as cutting as any insult. Maggie would stand there, dirt still under her fingernails from the morning's harvest, and force a smile. "We all contribute in our own ways, Vicky," she'd say quietly, though inside, each word of mockery left another scar on her heart. But everything changed when Tommy came into her life. Tommy was Maggie's grandson, her daughter Sarah's boy. Sarah lived in Portland, working as a nurse, and when Tommy was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder at age 6, the world had shifted on its axis. Sarah struggled as a single mother, working long shifts, trying to provide the specialized care Tommy needed. That's when Maggie stepped in. "Bring him to the farm," she'd told Sarah. "The quiet here will be good for him. I'll help." And so Tommy began spending summers and weekends at the farm. At first, he was withdrawn, overwhelmed by changes in routine, prone to meltdowns when the world became too loud, too bright, too much. But Maggie was patient. She learned his triggers, his comforts. She discovered that he loved the predictability of farm life, feeding the chickens at exactly 7 a.m., watering the tomatoes in precise rows, collecting eggs in the same basket every evening. She created a sensory room in the old barn, painted in calming blues and greens, filled with weighted blankets and noise-canceling headphones. She learned about autism, attended workshops, read every book she could find. When Tommy had anxiety attacks, she'd sit with him in the tomato rows, teaching him to breathe with the rhythm of the wind through the leaves. For counts in, hold for 4, for counts out, she'd whisper, her weathered hand on his small back. "You're safe, Tommy. Grandma's here." Slowly, beautifully, Tommy bloomed like the sunflowers Maggie planted along the fence line. He began to speak more, to smile. He showed a remarkable aptitude for mathematics and an encyclopedic knowledge of insects. The farm became his sanctuary, and Maggie became his anchor. Vicky, predictably, saw Tommy's condition as another opportunity for cruelty. "That boy is broken," she'd announced at Thanksgiving dinner, loud enough for Tommy to hear from the next room. "You're wasting your time, Maggie. He'll never be normal. You should focus on something productive instead of playing therapist." Maggie's hands had clenched so tightly around her fork that her knuckles went white, but she'd said nothing. She never did. Because despite everything, she believed in family. She believed that blood meant something, that eventually Vicky would see the error of her ways, would understand the value of kindness and compassion. She kept writing the checks. Kept covering Vicky's extravagant lifestyle. When Vicky confided, in a rare moment of vulnerability fueled by too much wine, that she'd been involved in covering up a data breach at her company to protect her boss and her own position, Maggie had even quietly hired lawyers to ensure the problem disappeared. The breach had involved stealing customer data from a competitor, a federal crime if discovered. But Maggie had made it go away, spending nearly $50,000 to protect the sister who treated her like dirt. "Family is everything," Earl used to say, and Maggie had held onto those words like a lifeline, even as they began to feel more like chains. The financial records Maggie kept hidden in a fireproof safe behind the false wall in her root cellar told a story of systematic exploitation that would have shocked anyone who saw them. Line by line, year by year, the numbers revealed the true cost of her devotion to family. 2019, $47,000 to pay off Vicky's credit card debt after her investment opportunity in a friend's startup went belly up. 2020, $23,000 for Vicky's Mercedes lease and insurance when she claimed her promotion hadn't come through. 2021, $85,000 to prevent foreclosure on Vicky's house when she'd temporarily fallen behind on mortgage payments. 2022, $50,000 for the data breach lawyers and hush money. 2023, $38,000 for Vicky's cosmetic surgeries and medical emergencies. 2024, $67,000 and counting for various expenses, including Vicky's lavish 55th birthday party where she'd publicly humiliated Maggie in front of 200 guests. The birthday party had been particularly cruel. Vicky had insisted Maggie attend, then introduced her to her society friends as "my sister, the farmer." Yes, she actually still does that, can you believe it? In this day and age. She'd even made Maggie stand up while she told a hilarious story about finding Maggie covered in cow manure years ago, embellishing details for maximum humiliation while her friends tittered behind manicured hands. Maggie had stood there, wearing the only nice dress she owned, a simple navy blue number she'd bought for Earl's funeral, while Vicky's friends, dripping in jewelry and designer labels, looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. She'd excused herself to the bathroom and cried silently in a stall, then returned with a smile plastered on her face. Meanwhile, her own sacrifices mounted. The tractor that desperately needed replacing coughed and wheezed through another season. The roof on the farmhouse leaked during heavy rains, requiring a strategic placement of buckets. Her truck, a 1998 Ford that Earl had bought new, had over 300,000 miles on it and more rust than paint. But every time she considered using some of the mineral rights money for herself, she'd think of family obligations and quietly transfer more funds to cover another of Vicky's emergencies. Her health suffered too. The chronic back pain from years of farm work went untreated because she couldn't afford physical therapy, money she was secretly funneling to Vicky. Her blood pressure medication was the generic version, while she ensured Vicky had the best healthcare money could buy. She developed arthritis in her hands, making the farm work increasingly painful, but hiring help seemed selfish when family needed support. Tommy was the only bright spot in her life. Now 8 years old, he'd grown into a remarkable boy. His anxiety had decreased significantly under Maggie's patient care. He could name every species of butterfly in California and had started a small garden of his own, meticulously tending to each plant with a focus that amazed everyone who saw it. "Grandma Maggie," he'd said one evening, his voice soft but clear, "why does Aunt Vicky say mean things to you?" Maggie had been caught off guard. Tommy rarely acknowledged the family dynamics, usually retreating into himself during gatherings. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "At the last barbecue. She said you were worthless." "But you're not worthless. You grow food. You help people. You helped me." His large brown eyes, so much like Earl's, had looked at her with an intensity that made her heart ache. "Sometimes people say things they don't mean," Maggie had replied, though the words tasted like lies. "She meant it," Tommy had said with the devastating honesty that only children possess. "I could tell. She's mean to you because she thinks you won't do anything about it." Out of the mouths of babes, Maggie had thought, but she'd simply hugged Tommy and changed the subject. The extended family was no better than Vicky. Cousin Robert, who ran a failing real estate business, would regularly hint about his financial troubles until Maggie would anonymously bail him out. Nephew Jackson had his college tuition mysteriously paid by a scholarship that was actually Maggie. Even the church renovation fund that Vicky had taken credit for organizing had been secretly funded entirely by Maggie. They all assumed Maggie was poor, living pension check to pension check, surviving on the meager profits from her farmers' market sales. At family gatherings, they'd sometimes take up collections to help poor Maggie, which Vicky would pocket with a sympathetic smile, never passing a penny along. Maggie knew but said nothing, adding it to the vast ledger of slights and thefts she'd endured. The systematic abuse had become so normalized that family members didn't even notice anymore. They'd arrive at gatherings and immediately begin criticizing her appearance, her home, her life choices. "Still driving that old truck, Maggie? This house could really use updating. Have you thought about selling the farm and moving to a retirement home?" Each comment was a small cut, and Maggie bled quietly, invisibly. But the worst part was watching how they treated Tommy. While they didn't actively mock him like Vicky did, their discomfort was obvious. They'd avoid him, speak about him as if he wasn't there, exchange meaningful looks when he had sensory overload. Only Maggie stood as his defender, creating safe spaces, advocating for his needs, weathering their judgment. "He's getting worse," Vicky had declared at the last Christmas dinner, while Tommy was in the next room organizing his collection of rocks by size and color. "You need to consider an institution, Maggie. You're not qualified to handle a child like that." "A child like what?" Maggie had asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "You know, special needs. Damaged. It's not fair to you to have this burden." "He's not a burden," Maggie had said firmly. "He's my grandson, and he's perfect exactly as he is." Vicky had rolled her eyes. "This is why you'll always be stuck on that farm, Maggie. You don't know when to cut your losses." If only Vicky knew, Maggie had thought, her hand unconsciously moving to her pocket where she kept the key to the safe containing the mineral rights documents. If only she knew that every luxury she enjoyed, every comfort she took for granted, came from the very person she considered worthless. The Sunnyvale History Museum stood like a Victorian ghost on Main Street, its red brick facade and tall windows promising quiet exploration of the past. Maggie had been planning this trip for weeks, knowing the museum's new exhibit on local farming history would fascinate Tommy. He'd been particularly interested in the geological surveys of the region, unknowingly curious about the very type of survey that had revealed Maggie's mineral wealth. It was a Tuesday morning in early March, chosen specifically because the museum would be less crowded. Maggie had called ahead to ensure there were no school groups scheduled. She packed Tommy's comfort items, his weighted vest, noise-reducing headphones, his favorite Smoothstone for stimming, and the tablet loaded with calming videos just in case. "Today's going to be perfect," she'd told Tommy at breakfast, watching him carefully arrange his cereal pieces in a perfect grid before eating them in order. "Just you, me, and all that history you love." But when they arrived at the museum, Vicky's Mercedes was already in the parking lot. "What a coincidence!" Vicky had exclaimed, emerging from her car in a designer suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary. "I was just meeting a client nearby and thought I'd tag along." "You don't mind, do you?" Maggie's heart sank. She could see Tommy already tensing, his routine disrupted. But she forced a smile. "Of course not." The first hour went smoothly enough. Tommy was enthralled by the exhibits, reading every placard aloud, asking detailed questions about soil composition and crop rotation that impressed even the museum docent. Maggie stayed close, watching for signs of overwhelm, while Vicky trailed behind, texting on her phone and occasionally making snide comments. "Look at this," Vicky had laughed, pointing to a photograph of farmers from the 1930s. "They look just like you, Maggie. Same fashion sense and everything." Tommy had frowned at that, moving closer to Maggie protectively, but said nothing. They were in the main hall, examining a display about mineral mining in the region, when it happened. The museum had been testing their new fire alarm system, and without warning, the piercing shriek filled the space. The sound was overwhelming, high-pitched, oscillating, bouncing off the marble floors and high ceilings in a cascade of sensory assault. Tommy's reaction was immediate and devastating. He dropped to the floor, hands clamped over his ears, screaming. His body began rocking violently, and tears streamed down his face. "Make it stop! Make it stop!" he wailed, his voice barely audible over the alarm. Maggie dropped to her knees beside him, her arthritis forgotten. "It's okay, baby. It's just a test. It'll stop soon." She tried to put the headphones on him, but he was thrashing too much. She pulled him against her, creating a human shield against the chaos. A crowd had gathered, other visitors, museum staff, all staring at the scene. Some with sympathy, others with that particular brand of judgment reserved for difficult children and their caregivers. Maggie didn't care. Her entire focus was on Tommy. "Someone please turn it off," she called out. "He has autism, the sound is hurting him." A staff member ran to help, but Vicky got there first. "Oh, for God's sake," Vicky said loudly, her voice carrying over the alarm. "This is ridiculous. He's not having a medical emergency, he's having a tantrum." She stood over them, her expression one of disgust mixed with embarrassment. "Maggie, you're making a scene. He's playing you, and you're falling for it like always." "Vicky, please," Maggie pleaded, still holding Tommy who was now hyperventilating. "Help me get him somewhere quiet." But Vicky did something then that shattered 23 years of Maggie's patience and loyalty. She reached down and yanked away Tommy's comfort stone from where it had fallen beside him. "He doesn't need this baby stuff," she announced to the growing crowd. "This is exactly why he acts this way, you enable him, Maggie. He needs to learn to deal with the real world." Tommy's screams intensified, reaching for his stone. "Mine! Give it back! Grandma, make her give it back!" "Give it to him," Maggie said, her voice low and dangerous. Vicky laughed, actually laughed. "Or what? You'll do nothing, like always. You're pathetic, Maggie. Look at you, on the floor like an animal. This is why you'll always be nothing more than a..." That's when Maggie saw it. While she was distracted trying to calm Tommy, Vicky had reached into Maggie's open purse and pulled out her wallet. With practiced ease, she extracted several bills and slipped them into her own pocket, all while maintaining her cruel monologue. The theft itself wasn't what broke Maggie. It was the casual nature of it, the complete lack of conscience, done while her grandson was in crisis, while she was begging for help. It was the culmination of decades of taking money, dignity, peace, joy, all taken without a second thought. The alarm finally stopped, leaving a ringing silence. Tommy was still crying but quieter now, exhausted. Maggie stood slowly, lifting him with strength born of rage. She took the stone from Vicky's hand without a word, gave it to Tommy, and began walking toward the exit. "Running away, as usual?" Vicky called after her. This is why everyone laughs at you, Maggie. You're weak. You're nothing. You're... Maggie turned, and something in her expression made Vicky stop mid-sentence. I'm done, Maggie said quietly. The words carried a weight that seemed to echo in the marble hall. I'm finally done. She carried Tommy to her truck, settled him in with his tablet and headphones, and drove home in silence while he recovered in the back seat. Her mind, however, was anything but quiet. 23 years of financial records, receipts, wire transfers, and emails cycled through her memory. The data breach cover-up. The anonymous payments. The mineral rights that Vicky knew nothing about. That night, after Tommy was asleep, Maggie sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea that had long gone cold. She pulled out a legal pad and began writing. Not a letter, a plan. At the top of the page, she wrote, Justice. Below it, she began listing everything she knew, everything she had, everything Vicky had taken. The museum had been the final straw, but the haystack had been building for decades. And Maggie knew exactly how to light the match. The next morning, Maggie moved with a purpose she hadn't felt in years. After getting Tommy safely to school, he'd recovered from the museum incident but was still fragile. She drove not to her fields but to a small office building on the outskirts of Sunnyvale. Mrs. Thompson, the lawyer, James Crawford, greeted her with surprise. He'd been handling her mineral rights contracts for 2 decades, but they usually communicated by mail. What brings you in? I need to understand something, Maggie said, placing a thick folder on his desk. These anonymous transfers I've been making, if I stop them, what happens? James reviewed the papers, his eyebrows rising higher with each page. These are substantial. And they're going to your sister? Among others. But she doesn't know they're from me. Well, legally, you can stop anytime. These aren't court-ordered or contractual obligations. But Maggie, this is over $310,000. Your sister's entire lifestyle appears to be built on these payments. I know, Maggie said quietly. What else do you see in those papers? James studied them more carefully. There are several mentions of some kind of corporate incident. A data breach? And legal fees paid to Jensen and Associates, their criminal defense attorneys. Maggie pulled out another folder, this one containing emails Vicky had sent her over the years, carelessly detailing her involvement in the data breach because she assumed her poor farmer sister wouldn't understand the implications. If someone were to report this. James began, then stopped. Maggie, this is serious. This describes federal crimes. Wire fraud, corporate espionage, theft of intellectual property. I know, Maggie repeated. I kept her out of prison. I paid for it all. And yesterday, while my autistic grandson was having a meltdown, she stole from my wallet and told me I was worthless. James leaned back in his chair. What do you want to do? First, stop all payments immediately. Every automatic transfer, every scheduled payment, everything. Second, I need you to recommend someone who handles whistleblower cases. Maggie, are you sure? This could destroy her. Maggie thought of Tommy on the museum floor, of Vicky's laughter, of 23 years of humiliation. She destroyed herself. I just stopped catching her. That afternoon, Maggie made her second stop, the FBI field office in San Francisco. She called ahead, spoken to someone in the cybercrime division, and made an appointment. The agent who met with her, Special Agent Diana Chen, was young but sharp-eyed. Mrs. Thompson, you said you have information about a covered-up data breach? Maggie handed over copies of everything, emails, receipts for legal fees, records of the stolen data Vicky had bragged about accessing. My sister works for Sunnyvale Tech Innovations. 3 years ago, she helped her boss steal customer data from their competitor, Pinnacle Software. They used it to undercut Pinnacle's bids, stealing approximately $2 million in contracts. Agent Chen reviewed the documents with increasing interest. This is very detailed. How did you come by this information? She told me. She thought I was too stupid to understand what she was describing. And when she got scared they might be caught, I paid for the lawyers to make it disappear. Here are those receipts too. You paid to cover up a federal crime? I thought I was protecting my family, Maggie said simply. I was wrong. Agent Chin made notes, asked detailed questions, had Maggie sign statements. We'll need to verify all of this, but if it checks out, Mrs. Thompson, your sister could face serious charges. Are you prepared for that? Maggie thought of every family gathering where she'd been mocked, every dollar stolen, every moment of kindness met with cruelty. I've been prepared for 23 years. I just didn't know it. The investigation moved faster than Maggie had anticipated. Within 2 weeks, federal agents had served warrants at Sunnyvale Tech Innovations. Computers were seized, documents subpoenaed. Vicky's boss was arrested first, and watching him on the news doing a perp walk in handcuffs, Maggie felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not regret. Just a hollow space where family loyalty used to live. Vicky called her that night, hysterical. Maggie! Something terrible is happening. The FBI came to my office. They're saying I was involved in some crime. You have to help me. How? Maggie asked calmly. I need money for a lawyer. A good one. Please, Maggie, I know we've had our differences, but we're family. We are, Maggie agreed. Which is why I'm going to give you the same support you gave Tommy at the museum. The same help you've given me for 23 years. What are you talking about? Maggie, this is serious. I know. Good luck, Vicky. She hung up and turned off her phone. The financial consequences hit Vicky simultaneously. The automatic mortgage payment that had mysteriously appeared in her account every month? Gone. The credit card that never seemed to max out despite her spending? Suddenly over its limit. The car payment, the insurance, the utilities, all of them came due at once, and for the first time in over 2 decades, Vicky had to face them alone. She called Maggie again from a different number. This time her tone was different, panicked, desperate. My cards were declined. All of them. And the mortgage company says I'm 3 months behind. That's impossible. There's been some mistake. Maggie, can you loan me just a little? Just until I sort this out? I'm just a poor farmer, Maggie said quietly. Remember? I have nothing to give. This isn't funny. I could lose everything. Yes, Maggie agreed. You could. The family found out about the FBI investigation through the local news. Sunnyvale Tech executive arrested in corporate espionage scandal ran on the front page, with Vicky's photo underneath. The article detailed the data breach, the cover-up, and mentioned that several employees were cooperating with federal authorities. Maggie's phone rang non-stop. Cousins, aunts, uncles, all calling to gossip, to ask if she'd heard, to express shock that perfect, successful Vicky could be involved in such a thing. Maggie didn't answer any of them. But she did answer when her nephew Jackson called. Aunt Maggie, did you see about Aunt Vicky? I did. She called me asking for money. Said you wouldn't help her. That's not like you. Maggie was quiet for a moment. Jackson, did you ever wonder who paid for your college? What? I had a scholarship. No, you didn't. I paid every penny. Just like I paid for Robert's business loans, for the church renovation, for Vicky's entire life. All of it was me. The silence on the other end stretched long. But, you're poor? Yes, that's what you all thought. What you were meant to think. I have mineral rights on my land worth millions. I've been supporting this entire family for over 20 years, and in return, I've been mocked, humiliated, and stolen from. So no, Jackson, I won't help Vicky. My helping days are over. The federal investigation into Sunnyvale Tech Innovations uncovered more than even Maggie had known. Vicky hadn't just helped steal data once, it had become a pattern. Emails recovered from C's computers showed she'd been the architect of multiple corporate espionage schemes, using her position to access competitor systems and selling information to the highest bidder. Agent Chin called Maggie with updates. Your sister was more involved than she let on, even to you. We're looking at potential charges for wire fraud, conspiracy, theft of trade secrets, and racketeering. She's looking at serious federal time. How long? Maggie asked. If convicted on all charges? 15 to 20 years. Maggie felt a complex mix of emotions, vindication, sadness, and strangely, relief. The sister she'd loved had been gone for a long time, replaced by someone she didn't recognize. This was just making it official. Vicky's arrest happened on a Thursday morning. Maggie heard about it from Tommy's teacher, who called to make sure Maggie was okay after seeing it on the news. The footage was brutal, Vicky in handcuffs, being led from her McMansion in her pajamas, neighbors watching from their driveways. The family explosion was immediate and spectacular. Maggie's phone rang so insistently she finally turned it off and put it in a drawer. But they found other ways to reach her. Cousin Robert showed up at her farm first. Maggie, we need to talk about Vicky. No, Maggie said, not looking up from the tomato plants she was tending. We don't. She's family. You can't just abandon her. Maggie straightened, her back protesting, and looked at Robert directly. Where was this family loyalty when she humiliated me at every gathering? When she called me worthless? When she mocked my grandson for having autism? That was just Vicky being Vicky. And this is just me being me. The difference is, I'm done pretending family means accepting abuse. Robert's face reddened. She said you could help but you're refusing. That you have money. I do. Mineral rights to this land. Worth quite a lot, actually. Robert's expression shifted, calculating. Well then, you could. I could. But I won't. And before you ask, the anonymous donor who's been keeping your real estate business afloat? That was me too. But those days are over. She watched the realization dawn on his face, followed quickly by anger, then panic. You can't just cut everyone off. Watch me. One by one, they all came. Aunts who suddenly remembered how much they'd always loved her. Cousins who discovered they'd always admired her strength. Uncles who'd always known she was the backbone of the family. Each one with a hand out, a sob story, a reason why Maggie should continue being their secret benefactor. To each, Maggie said the same thing, no. The most dramatic confrontation came from Vicky's husband, Richard, whom Maggie had always pitied. He'd been as blind to Vicky's crimes as he'd been to the source of their wealth. She's going to prison, Maggie. Prison! Our kids won't have a mother. Maggie thought of Tommy, motherless in a different way, fighting battles Vicky's children would never understand. Your kids are adults, Richard. They'll survive. Tommy survived being mocked and belittled by their mother while having a disability. I think your children can handle visiting her in federal prison. You're heartless. No, Maggie corrected. I'm done being heartful to people who never had a heart for me. The financial dominoes fell quickly. Without Maggie's secret support and with Vicky's legal bills mounting, the family's carefully constructed lifestyle crumbled. Vicky's house went into foreclosure within 3 months. Her Mercedes was repossessed. The designer clothes were sold on consignment websites for pennies on the dollar. Robert's real estate business, already shaky, collapsed without the monthly infusions of cash. He blamed the economy, the market, everything but his own incompetence that Maggie had been covering for years. The church called about the renovation fund, confused about why the anonymous donations had stopped. Maggie told them to ask Vicky if they could reach her in federal detention. But the most satisfying moment came during Vicky's trial. Maggie was called as a witness, not for the prosecution, but for the defense. Vicky's lawyer, a public defender since she couldn't afford anyone else, wanted to establish Vicky's character as a devoted family member. Mrs. Thompson, the lawyer began, would you describe your sister as family-oriented? Yes, Maggie said clearly. She was very oriented toward what family could do for her. That's not what I. She was oriented toward mocking family members with disabilities. Oriented toward stealing from family members' wallets. Oriented toward taking financial support while giving emotional abuse in return. The prosecutor smiled slightly. The defense attorney looked defeated. No further questions. As Maggie stepped down from the witness stand, she caught Vicky's eye. For the first time in 23 years, Vicky looked at her with something other than contempt. It might have been fear. It might have been respect. It might have been understanding, finally, of who had held all the cards all along. The verdict came on a rainy Tuesday in September, guilty on all counts. Vicky stood as the judge read the charges, her orange jumpsuit a far cry from the designer suits she'd once flaunted. 15 years in federal prison, with possibility of parole and 10 for good behavior. Maggie attended the sentencing. Not for closure, that had come months ago, but to bear witness to the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. As court officers led Vicky away, she turned to look at Maggie one last time. Her lips moved, forming words Maggie couldn't hear across the courtroom. It might have been "I'm sorry." It might have been "I hate you." It didn't matter anymore. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. They'd gotten wind of the family drama underlying the corporate espionage case. "Mrs. Thompson, how does it feel to see your sister going to prison?" Maggie paused, considering. "It feels like justice. Not revenge, justice. There's a difference. But she's your family." "Family isn't blood," Maggie said firmly. "Family is the people who support you, who celebrate your victories and comfort you in your defeats. Family doesn't mock autistic children or steal from those who love them. I've learned that the family you choose is worth more than the family you're born into." The story hit the local news that night, then went viral. Humble farmer grandmother exposes sister's crimes after years of secret support became a sensation on social media. People called her a hero. Others called her cold. Maggie didn't care what strangers thought. She had more important things to focus on. With the toxic relationships severed and the financial drain stopped, Maggie finally had the resources to build something meaningful. She started with Tommy. 2 years later, the Sunnyvale therapeutic farm stood where Maggie's old tomato fields once grew. The renovation had cost nearly $200,000, but every penny was worth it. The main barn had been converted into a sensory-friendly learning center, with quiet rooms, soft lighting, and specialized equipment for children with autism and other developmental differences. Tommy, now 10, helped run tours for new families. His anxiety had decreased dramatically once the family stress disappeared from their lives. "This is where I learned to be okay with being me," he'd tell visitors, showing them the garden where each child could grow their own plants, learning patience and responsibility at their own pace. "My grandma Maggie built this because she knows that different doesn't mean less than," he'd say proudly. "It just means different." The center employed 15 people, including several therapists, special education teachers, and farm hands. One of them, surprisingly, was Jackson, Maggie's nephew. He'd come to her 6 months after Vicky's sentencing, humbled and genuine. "Aunt Maggie, I'm sorry. For all of it. For not standing up for you, for taking your generosity for granted, for not seeing who you really were." "And who am I?" Maggie had asked. "You're the strongest person I know. And the kindest, even when people didn't deserve it. I don't want money. I want to learn from you. To be better." She'd hired him as an assistant farm manager. He was good with the children, patient and kind in ways the old Jackson never would have been. Sarah, Maggie's daughter, had moved back from Portland to help run the therapeutic programs. "Mom, what you've built here, it's incredible." "It's what I always wanted to build," Maggie admitted. "I just had to clear away the weeds first." The extended family had scattered. Robert had moved to Arizona, telling everyone who'd listen about his cruel aunt who'd destroyed the family. The others simply faded away, their interest in Maggie evaporating along with her financial support. She didn't miss them. But new family had formed. The parents of the children who came to the farm, the therapists who worked there, the community members who volunteered, they became the family Maggie had always deserved. They celebrated her successes, supported her during challenges, and never once asked what they could take from her. One evening, as the sun set over the farm, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Maggie sat on her porch with Tommy. They were watching the new chickens, therapy animals for the children, pecking around the yard. "Grandma," Tommy said, "are you sad about Aunt Vicky?" Maggie considered the question. "I'm sad about who she became. I'm sad about the years I wasted trying to earn love from someone incapable of giving it. But I'm not sad about the choice I made. To stop helping her? To start helping myself. And you. And all the kids who come here now." Tommy nodded, processing this in his careful way. "I think you made the right choice." "So do I, sweetheart. So do I." As if summoned by the conversation, Maggie's phone buzzed. A notification from her lawyer, another quarterly payment from the mineral rights, nearly $80,000 this time. Money that would go toward expanding the therapy center, adding an equestrian program for the children. She thought briefly of Vicky in federal prison, probably complaining about the food, the clothes, the injustice of it all. Then she deleted the thought like she deleted the toxic relationships. Some gardens needed to be completely replanted to truly flourish. "Come on," she told Tommy. "Let's go feed the chickens. Then we can check on your butterfly garden." They walked together toward the barn, grandmother and grandson, surrounded by the farm that had become a sanctuary. Behind them, the sun set on the old life. Ahead, everything was growing. In the end, Maggie learned the most valuable lesson of her 63 years. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't holding on, it's letting go. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success, happiness, and the knowledge that you finally valued yourself enough to demand the respect you always deserved. The Sunnyvale Therapeutic Farm thrived, helping hundreds of children over the years. Maggie's story became legend in the autism community, the grandmother who turned pain into purpose, who transformed betrayal into blessing. And Vicky? She served 12 years, got out on good behavior, and tried to contact Maggie once. The letter was returned unopened with a simple note, "No longer at this address. The person you're looking for has moved on." Because Maggie had. Fully, completely, and without a single regret. As she often told the families at the farm, the best fertilizer for new growth is sometimes the ashes of what needed to burn. Don't be afraid to light the match.